Hi, I'm Sharon Renfro. Our Hearts and Minds at SharonRenfro.com believes that we must open our minds before we can open our hearts to one another. A fundamental idea to an alternative way to understand the psychology of relationships. This means that thinking is the key to successful, long-term, meaningfully connected, sustainable relationships. Today's video applies the 3 steps of thinking to the relationship issue of conflict in relationships. Now, I will briefly define each step of thinking, followed by an example of how to apply that step of thinking to the issue conflict in relationships. Hopefully, that will help you to begin to learn how to use thinking in your relationships. Now, the first step of thinking is to research, and that means that we gather objective and pertinent information. Number 1, conflict is the intentional imposition of one's will onto another person. Number 2, conflict is one of 4 behavioral strategies that are adaptive under certain circumstances when the emotional system assesses for a threat to the individual in the relationship. Number 3, at birth, everyone begins this lifelong process of balancing the need to be an individual and the need to be in a relationship. Both needs are required for survival. Number 4, the psychological component of self provides the human being 3 levels of awareness to which to respond to the environment and adaptive strategies that correspond to these 3 separate and distinct brain systems. A, the emotional brain, which is the lizard brain, is an instinctual, automatic, simple, black and white system designed to secure individual safety in physically dangerous environments and provides very basic behavioral strategies that are adaptive in those environments. B, the subjective brain performs a reassessment for safety or threat using feelings. Positive feelings reinforce the sense of safety. Negative feelings reinforce the sense of threat. C, the objective brain uses the adaptive strategy of thought, which is a 3-step process designed to provide adaptive strategies in complex environments for cooperation, problem solving, understanding, logic, and empathy. Number 5, the human being begins life only able to use the emotional system and learns the most basic cues to do this. Number 6, feelings eventually assist to refine or reinforce the emotional assessment. Number 7, conventional psychology promotes the use of emotions and feelings, use your gut, how do you feel, as relationship tools. So the human being ends up using the most simplest strategies for the most complex needs as adults. Doesn't sound like a very smart idea. Number 8, the emotional behaviors available to the individual to negotiate the sense of threat in a relationship are conflict, fight, distance, flight, pretend, camouflage, and cut off, play dead. None of which addresses complex situations. We therefore apply simplistic solutions to complex problems. However, these behaviors are meant to instantly stop a threat and reduce anxiety, but they don't solve problems. Number 9, conflict often reduces the anxiety of a threat for an individual who experiences anxiety that an individual need is not being met in a relationship. Number 10, conflict serves the function to temporarily reduce anxiety by forcing another person to bend to the will of the other. The issue itself takes on a level of irrelevance as the process is propelled by a sense of threat that must be addressed. Number 11, as conflict has been learned at a very early age to be an effective tool to reduce anxiety, the behavior is simply automatic anytime the threat of not having one's needs met arises. Step 2 of thinking, reason. Now, reason means that we're going to apply logic to objective and pertinent information to attain a deep understanding of ourselves and relationship process. Number 1. No matter how a relationship partner responds to his or her partner, once the partner senses a need to impose his or her will, a conflict will erupt. Number 2. The conflict is less about the issue and more about the need to discharge anxiety in a very specific way right now. The anxiety itself stems from an imbalance between the need to be an individual and the need for a relationship, and the relationship not meeting one of those needs. Confusion about the reason for the conflict, since the reason stems more from the past learning, results, and its unexplained repeated patterns of conflict develop. Number 3. Conventional psychology sees conflict as a natural part of relationship process. From an alternative perspective, conflict is a misuse of an adaptive strategy that is far too simplistic for the complexity of an adult relationship. Number 4. Conflict provides a short-term strategy, very short-term, just to reduce anxiety now from a perceived threat. It returns a person to a false, sense of safety because there has been no resolution of whatever the problem is. Step 3 of thinking is reflection, and that's the consideration of both partners to reach some sort of a resolution. It involves looking into the future for the long-term consequences. It involves empathy for the other person and understanding. It involves self-respect and respect for others. It's the highest level of thinking. It has the most effective adaptive strategies for the human being. Number 1, identify the circumstances that lead to an imbalance in the need to be an individual and the need for a relationship. Number 2, as anxiety begins to build, identify the behaviors you use to construct the conflict. Nagging, blaming, finding fault. What cues do you pick up on to push the conflict forward? Number 3, what alternative explanations would account for what is happening? How might the relationship partner view what is happening? Number 4, what does conflict do for you? How is it helpful? How long does the benefits last? What unintended damage occurs? How would you like to handle the problem instead? Number 5, what is so important to you about forcing your relationship partner to bend to your will? How does forcing another person into something affect your long-term relationship? How does conflict imbalance your relationship partner's need to be an individual and the need to be a self? Number 6, continue to ask yourself questions. Look for patterns to emerge. Number 7, journal. Talk to your relationship partner. Let him or her know about this internal process and what you're actually trying to achieve. Number 8, recognize that your relationship partner's resistance to bend to your will is a natural reaction. Now, we must open our minds to be able to open our hearts to one another. If these ideas have been beneficial to you, please like us so that others may find us to have the help that they need. Also, you may find information and in-depth discussion of these ideas in our free podcast series, Our Hearts and Minds, The Psychology of Relationships, at SharonRenfro.com or Castbox. And thank you so much for listening.